My name is Corbin Hyland, and this is my portion of our group teaching project on Governor Mike Pence's acceptance speech of the vice presidency under President Trump at the 2016 Republican National Convention. I was tasked with looking at several different aspects of Pence's speech. They were, what's the central idea or thesis of his speech? How well does the speaker, make his central idea clear and stick to it and explain why you think this? Identify the main points presented in a speech, and what pattern does the speaker use, and is it effective? So we're going to look at all these aspects in a couple of different ways. The first being, obviously, his central idea or thesis is pretty straightforward in this speech. It is that Governor Mike Pence is accepting the vice presidential nominee under now President-elect Donald Trump. And basically his quote was, "I accept the nomination to run and serve as the Vice President of the United States." He sticks to this very well throughout his entire speech. He kind of introduces himself, shows us a different side of him that I was not even familiar with Governor Pence at all before the election. So Senator Pence makes his central idea very clear. He uses his speech to tell the American people what to expect from a Trump-Pence presidency. And he also states who he is, what he believes in, and what and how he will treat the office of vice presidency. Doesn't really talk about the specifics of what he'll do, but he does kind of mention some things that him and President Trump have talked about in the past. Senator Pence displays the key aspects of having an understandable message. He's very informative, honest, relevant, and clear to his audience. He's very appropriate and professional in his dress and attire for the event. He's, not in a t-shirt and shorts. He's in a suit and tie. He's very well groomed for his Republican National Convention. The language and vocal delivery are fitting for his speech. He keeps good eye contact with the audience, although you can tell there's several teleprompters in front of him. You can see that Governor Pence does use some very good eye contact throughout this to really get his point across to the people of the Republican Party that he's speaking to. So next is identification of the main points of his speech, and there are, in my opinion, are several. The first main point being his actual introduction. If you notice in his introduction, he talks about himself in Indiana as a governor, but he also talks about his family. He introduces his wife and his mother that are there and talks about his 3 kids, and especially mentions his son that is in the Marine Corps as a second lieutenant. I think that's very important to note because of the current trend in our military and how people are looking at our military and police. So I think that's something very positive that he notes. He also talks about his father, his Christianity, and kind of where he grew up, and that he didn't really grow up in a political household, but he had some real political heroes in JFK and Martin Luther King Jr. And I think those are important to note because it really speaks to who he is as a person. So his second main point, in my opinion, was how he talked about Donald Trump and basically the odds he has faced through this race. The media has been against him. The Democratic Party has obviously been against President-elect Trump now. And it's just been a very difficult battle for him. He doesn't, can't seem to necessarily win. The third main point, in my opinion, is his comparison and contrast of Mr. Trump and Secretary Clinton. He does talk about, some things, how President-elect Trump is very different. He's very vocal. He's not scared to say what he thinks, while Secretary Clinton is quite the opposite in that aspect. She's very reserved, very political. She, has the governmental experience behind her that President Trump doesn't have, but that basically talks about the American people are ready for a change. And it really shows the differences between the two, in my opinion, during his RNC speech. So the pattern he uses, in my opinion, is a combination of 2 different patterns. He uses a topical pattern and a cause and effect pattern. His topical pattern relates to his speech and how it's set up into different categories and subcategories. He obviously he has an introduction, body, and conclusion, but he doesn't have the certain points like a chronological order per se. He just talks about different things and really gets his point across well with his thesis. His order is logical and supports the central idea of the speech very well, in my opinion. Where he uses the cause and effect is to show basically how a Trump presidency would affect the nation as in relation to a Clinton presidency would kind of affect it in a negative way. So it's kind of a subcategory that he uses the cause and effect in, but I did want to differentiate that in between the two. And lastly being is it effective? I think his speech was very effective. He was very well represented in that speech. Um, he's very effective in the way he talks, and he really captures the audience's attention and makes them become active listeners. And if you notice, there are several points throughout the speech where they actually start chanting different phrases. We're not going to go into what those are, but they're really listening and they're really paying attention. As the camera scans the audience, you can see that everybody's looking up at him and going, "Oh wow, Mr. Pence may be a really good guy." So it's something that's very interesting in my opinion. He hit really a lot of the major points that the conservatives on the floor wanted to hear. Everything from economy to the militarization that him and Donald Trump were going to work to build the military back up from what it is today. So, in my opinion, I think he hit all the aspects he really needed to. And he even mentions Trump, rebuilding Washington in a way as far as his cabinet and Supreme Court justices and things of that nature. So, in my opinion, Governor Pence does an excellent job talking about the different aspects that he has during this. And my analysis is that his speech was very good, very to the point. So he keeps his central idea and thesis throughout. It's clearly demonstrated in the first couple sentences of his speech. He identifies the main points very well, and he keeps his pattern very flowing. It's very appropriate for the audience. So thank you very much.